Friday's Just Baseball show is a little bit of playing catch up while Peter and Aram are on the road finishing up this 5 games in 5 days NL Central tour. It's a Just Baseball show presented by BetMGM, me, Jack McMullen, and the managing editor of JustBaseball.com, Ryan Finkelstein, on Friday, August 2nd. The only two divisions that we did not get to in terms of a deadline preview were the National League Central and the National League East. So we're reformatting a little bit, and we are going to go with a post-deadline outlook, pre-deadline preview, post-deadline outlook. How did you get better? How did you get worse? What is the big strength? What is the glaring weakness on all of that? We'll get into it, but before that, Fink, how'd your Mets do? And save the overarching thought on the New York Mets for, when we break them down a little bit later on in this episode. But in terms of the acquisitions and what you wanted, how did your New York Mets come out of this deadline? Decent?
I think if you grade it on the curve of what people were paying for certain things, David Stearns did a very nice job. He addressed needs, but he didn't mortgage the future. And I think that was the right call when you think about where they're at in the race and what was available. So I thought it was like a very solid B, but if you grade it on the curve, it's almost an A because they didn't overpay.
Were you at all nervous that an Acuna was going to be gone or a Jet or a Gilbert? Were you worried that Steve Cohen was going to say, hey, let's give this a shot here? Or was that something that you were willing to see happen?
Well, to put those three guys in the same conversation, I was not worried. I'd be more worried to see like a Brandon Sproat or a Jonah Tong get traded.
Yeah.
I was perfectly happy if Luis Angel Acuna was traded. I've been kind of mocking him in trades whenever I've talked about a star player on Locked On Mets for over a year now. So
Yeah.
that was the one that I would have been fine with. But ultimately, I was very happy with what they did. I was happy they didn't give up any of those guys. I think there's another year coming where it'd be more worth it to go all in.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Quick note on the minor league front. A lot of the signings are done in terms of draft picks. Did you see Travis Bazzana's left on left grand slam in his third high A game?
Yeah.
This guy, like, he might be it, man.
How long is he going to be in high A for?
I don't know. So Dylan Cruz, the way that worked is like he spent way too long in low A and then he went right to double, and that's where he finished the year. Bazzana being in high A right now and hitting the ground running the way he did, it makes me think that he won't be there for very long. But then I wonder what the next step is. Is it double A for 2 weeks or is it double A for the rest of the year? Especially when you have a team that like is really good and could very much so utilize him in that lineup. I don't think he debuts this year, but man, like if he stays on this stretch, who knows like what could happen
Yeah.
with the Cleveland Guardians.
I think the race then starts to dictate it, right? If they're just cruising and they're fine, okay. But if all of a sudden, like the Twins start catching up to them in the final month and you need a little jolt,
Yeah.
you never know. When teams don't have the trade deadline to make moves anymore, all of a sudden the farm system is your one source to maybe give you a lift. So you really never know.
Wednesday was such a cool day because you had Travis Bazzana with his first minor league home run, and it was a grand slam left on left. Jackson Holliday had a poetic return to the big leagues, and it was so good to see him not like shut the haters up because obviously that first stint was terrible in the big leagues, but it proved that this guy was not damaged goods, going 435 down the right field line at 109 on a grand slam in his first game back in the big leagues. In case you forgot, this guy is one of the better hitting prospects in all of baseball. He was the number one prospect in baseball coming into the year. Did you catch that one live? It was one of the very few day games that was on Wednesday.
I did not catch it live. I was still just recoiling from everything we did on Tuesday.
Yeah,
But I did watch the highlight.
I got up in
Uh,
time to watch that one, I will say.
yeah. Yeah, so I did see the home run and very cool moment. There's already holiday jerseys in the stands. I thought that was the coolest thing when they shot to the one guy that was all fired up wearing his holiday number 7. Really cool stuff, and has a chance to completely change that narrative for himself. He's on the team when it matters most here. So
Hot button topic question. I am very anti wearing a jersey of somebody younger than you. Where do you stand on that front?
I don't wear jerseys in general. Yeah, I think I'm past that point where yeah, I might have a shirt, like I got a shirt with a polar bear on it. I got shirts,
That's
but
fine.
I don't rock jerseys anymore.
I
So
feel like
yeah,
the maturation of baseball fan goes jersey, like the jersey is the first one to go, the jersey shirt.
yeah, yeah,
And then the actual jersey, the button-down jersey is the next one to go. I'll roll with, novelty t-shirts as much as possible. Like
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
fine with that. If I was in Cincinnati and Ellie De La Cruz is going crazy, I'm gonna grab a shirt from like an homage or something with an Ellie De La Cruz, you know, ode on that shirt. But I don't know. It's just something about wearing like an Ellie De La Cruz jersey. He's 22. I'm 26. Like,
It's funny.
I'm envious for sure, but come on.
I was rocking an El Troll shirt for Francisco Alvarez, and I was in California and walking around downtown Disneyland. I'm like, what do these people think I'm wearing this shirt for? Because no one knows that it's Francisco Alvarez. I'm just wearing a shirt that says the Troll on it.
Wasn't Trolls a Disney movie?
Maybe I think that might have been DreamWorks.
Was it
I don't know why I
DreamWorks?
know that. Yeah, but
Pixar. Yeah, I know Pixar is owned by Disney, I think. Or they
there would have been, yeah, maybe they thought it was something along those lines, but no,
also I didn't
Francisco
know
Alvarez.
Disneyland had a downtown.
It's very small. It's very small. Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. We can talk about the Cubs now if you want.
Yeah, I think that'd be better. Let's move on to that.
Let's do that. So, again, we're doing the National League Central and the National League East post trade deadline outlook. And I'm going to run through the transactions per team. We're going to identify the greatest strength of each team moving forward and maybe the most glaring weakness of the team moving forward. And we're moving the goalposts kind of team by team. The Milwaukee Brewers have serious postseason aspirations. The Atlanta Braves, the Philadelphia Phillies have serious postseason aspirations. The Marlins, like their strength and weakness is not going to be as catered to competing in 2024 as the Philadelphia Phillies' strength and weakness. And the Cubs is an interesting conversation to start this with because they got marginally better, I think, in 2024, but they got a hell of a lot better in 2025 and 2026. The notable transactions that we got from the Chicago Cubs. Nate Pearson acquired for Yohendrick Pinango and Josh Rivera. Pinango, it seemed like a 40-man pinch there, and they got a guy whose lowercase x numbers are a lot better than his real numbers in Nate Pearson. Once upon a time, one of the better pitching prospects in baseball. Now, an okay reliever for Toronto the last bit, but now he's in the Cubs bullpen. The Cubs also acquire Isaac Paredes for Christopher Morel, who homered in with two of his first three games as a Tampa Bay Ray, along with Hunter Biggie and Ty Johnson, two pitching prospects. And then they swap Mark Leiter Jr. out of that bullpen. He goes to the Yankees for Benjamin Cowles and Jack Neely, two upper level minor league prospects. In terms of strength, where do you think that strength lies for the Chicago Cubs?
This season, I'd say it's their rotation is still very strong. To look at four guys with a sub 3.5 ERA, you wonder how they haven't had a better season. So I'd say that's their biggest strength right now. Moving forward, I think Paredes was a great ad that becomes a major strength for them. Because I got some interesting thoughts on the glaring weaknesses that tie together in my eyes.
So my strength like kind of falls into the Paredes acquisition. I think they built a lineup that is easier to palate moving forward. That was my
Yeah.
thing. And the rotation, I'm with you. In terms of this year, the rotation, certainly the strength when you're running out Steele, Imanaga, Assad. And you keep Tyon. I'm not sure why they kept Tyon at the price point.
Yeah.
It
My
seems like
guess is they just set a really high price and they didn't want to just come down on it in a major way. So
totally fair. Totally fair. But, you're looking at next year being year two in earnest for Michael Bush. And Seiya Suzuki has performed pretty damn well so far this year. Isaac Paredes now joins the fold. Dansby's next year can't be any worse than it has been this
yeah.
year, quite frankly. So I think building for the future in that lineup is the strength. The weakness for me is like I could be lazy and say the bullpen, sure. This catching situation is one of the more bleak in baseball. And
Yeah.
I don't know who the answer long term is at catcher. And you could say, well, Moises Ballesteros, who's hitting the crap out of the ball in AAA. Is he? Like, is he defensively? Offensively, he's got a spot in this lineup. But defensively, he's 5'8". It's very Kirky. It's very Alejandro Kirky. And is that something that you want defensively, or would you prefer to see him get DH reps? There are a lot of guys that are kind of, line changing in that DH spot right now. I'd say the catching situation is the weakness for me moving forward. I'm not totally married to it. Where are you at on that front?
Yeah, catching was definitely part of kind of what fell into mine. Mine was offense up the middle, defense in the corners. And
Huh.
the way it came to that, I mean, you see the season that Swanson and Horner are having, not their best. Pete Crow Armstrong in center field, if that's their answer moving forward, he still hasn't hit yet. And then the catching situation just been brutal. And then just defense in the corners, just kind of a play on what's happened this year because you had Morel at third base for a while. They've improved that. But Seiya Suzuki, Ian Happ hasn't even had the same defensive season we've seen in the past. So offense up the middle, defense in the corners.
I like that. And that was very creative. Good on you,
Thank
Frank.
you. Thank
That
you.
was
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, we go to Cincinnati here. The Cincinnati Reds, they were sort of kind of selling, I guess. They acquired Ty France, who was in DFA limbo. Ty France and cash for Andrew Salcedo. He was outrighted. Davis Wenzel comes to Cincinnati for cash. Again, another guy that was in limbo. They trade a player to be named later, or no, they acquire a player to be named later, pardon, for Austin Slater and Livan Soto. They move Lucas Sims, who was pretty effective in that bullpen, for Ovis Portes. I think I'm saying that right. And then they move Frankie Montas, their big ticket, who was an underwhelming starting pitcher at a high price point. They get Joey Weimer, who's really struggled this year between the big leagues and AAA. Jacob Junis and cash to kind of hedge the Junis thing in turn for Frankie Montas. They sold. They didn't sell as much as I was expecting them to sell. What this deadline said to me was they feel like they got screwed health wise this year and they're just going to try and run it back next year. Is that the vibe you got from this deadline?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And kind of jump into my glaring weakness. That's exactly what I think happened here. I just think I said the glaring weakness is just vibes.
Yeah.
And the reason why I went that way is it's just ever since, Matt McLean went down and Marte got suspended, it just feels like this has been a year from hell for them. And I think they're probably doing the right thing not to read too much into it. Sometimes you just have a season where things aren't going your way, but I don't think they had to completely scrap everything and start over. There's still a lot of talent there. I think it makes sense to have made some moves around the margins, make some good trades that you like, but not blow anything up.
Like I was kind of expecting them to move in India because India's value
Yeah.
felt pretty high. But India, it's not like he's performing at a world class level right now. The OPS is in the mid 700s. Like it's fine, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. But um, yeah, I'm with you. The vibes feel off right now, and of course they were dealing with guys. Noelvi Marte missed the first 80 games of the year with a PED suspension, and CES had a season ending surgery, and not to mention like Williamson. I'm not even sure if Williamson threw an inning for them this year. He was working his way back from a shoulder strain, and then they stopped the rehab. Antone, Jabot, Pagan, Suter, all on the IL in that bullpen. But McLean has been a glaring omission. They're at the point now where their four-man bench, Santiago Espinal, who I thought was a good pickup in the moment, but Espinal, it's kind of clear is like his impact is capped. His level that he can produce at the major league level offensively is capped. Stuart Fairchild, he's a red. He's a fine red. Ty France, okay, you're looking at a reclamation project, and then Eric Yang is the backup catcher right now, and Yang in essence is a favor call up. This guy was an org guy. He was playing once a week in Double A and Triple A. So it's just a very depleted lineup. I like your vibes shout on the weakness. I'm gonna go with vitamin C levels. Is that fair? I, I
Yeah.
don't know if that's right because that just kind of feels like immune health. This is calcium levels. How about that?
Okay.
Bones and ligaments
Yeah.
and all that. So calcium levels is the biggest weakness. In terms of strength, it's probably control in the rotation, contractual control in the
Yeah.
rotation for me. Hunter Green has blossomed into who we thought Green could be. Through 21 starts, he's got a 2.97 ERA right now. And I was not expecting him to be sitting at 124 innings on August 1st, but that's where we're at this point. Lodolo absolutely blew up on Wednesday. Having said that, Nick Lodolo's on the mound, and even with the blow up, he's got a 3.9. Abbott's there. They have newfound riches in Carson Spires. I like what's going on. I liked the Montes signing because I felt like they were a free agent arm away from being good. I think this offseason, I'm going to say the same thing. They're a free agent arm away from being good.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm actually in my head now picturing like who's the guy that signs in Cincinnati. But that'll be a conversation for the offseason. For some reason, Luis Severino is actually popping into my head.
Sevy's
Um,
popping into your head, so Sevy pops into my head. I mean Bueller's from Lexington, like that could
there you
be
go.
an interesting one. I think somebody in that type of area where you could be looking at 2-year deal, 3-year deal, and you grab somebody like that. I think Sevy's a better shout because Bueller might be that might be punching above Cincinnati's weight class. He might be pricing them out. I'm not sure.
My thought was like maybe they're the team that gives Sevy like 4 years, like not a crazy amount, but he gets like an extra year there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my greatest strength I had was the top three in their rotation, and then I just put Ellie. So
Yep.
I'm right there with you. I think moving forward, that's their greatest strength, and they do have enough exciting pieces around that to really make a run at it. They just need to have a better season where things are going a little bit more their way.
Runner up for biggest strength jersey sales. Speaking to that Ellie point,
Yeah,
they're always going to sell De La Cruz number 44 jerseys. I've got
yeah.
zero doubt in that. We go to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh had a sneaky active last hour of the deadline. Monday, late morning, early afternoon. So about 30 hours before the deadline, a prospect ish swap. Quinn Priester went to Boston for Nick York, who's in AAA now. Sneaky pickup. York feels very Nick Gonzalez from last year, where he's in the finishing stages of, his minor league hitting maturation. And the question is, what's it going to look like in the big leagues? He's been really good in the minor leagues so far this year, and he's got an OPS at 900 in AAA with, I think, 38 games in Worcester and now a game in Indy as well. But Pirates also got some bullpen help. They go and grab Jalen Beeks for Luis Peralta, Freddie Peralta's younger brother, who is sporting a sub-1 ERA between high A and double A. Josh Walker, he's coming to Indy. Is Josh Walker going to be a big league help?
I wouldn't be too excited about it. There were so many trades that I think are trades that you see in the middle of the season that just happened at the deadline that are made more out of. Josh Walker was one of those. He was DFA'd, so I wouldn't look too much into it. He does have pretty good stuff, but he has really struggled at the big league level. So
Yeah, I know he's got a sub 3 in Syracuse and the strikeout numbers are good,
yes,
but at the end of
yeah.
the day, there's never been, and are you noticing this in Syracuse, like keeping tabs on those games? There's never been a starker contrast between AAA ability and big league ability.
Oh yeah. And
I,
it seems to go both ways too, because you'd be like, all right, it's a really hitter-friendly league, but then there's guys that are doing really well pitching in that league. It feels like bullpen arms and bats are. It's like starting pitchers that really struggle there. But yeah, it's hard to take much of anything from it.
yeah, there's nothing, frankly, that I'm taking from offensive numbers. I will say, like, you have to prove it to me at the major league level, because again, league average OPS, I think, is 75 points higher in AAA right now than it is in the big leagues. In the international league, not even to mention the PCL, I think league average OPS in the PCL is over 800, which like is fun if you like offense, but if you like
Yeah.
pitching success, that's not the league for you. Additional moves for the Pirates: Brian De La Cruz. They get corner outfield help. He comes from Miami for Jun-Suk Shim, this super talented but never available Korean right-hander. And Garrett Forrester was also in that deal. Prospect for prospect swap. Billy Cook, AAA outfielder, comes from Baltimore to the Pirates for Patrick Riley. Isaiah Kiner Falefa in a 1-for-1 swap with Charles McAdoo, who is one of, if not the breakout prospect in minor league baseball this year. I think about 320, OPS about 950. I think a 13th round pick out of San Jose State last year. So the Pirates had somebody that they were not expecting to do this whatsoever, and they turn it into, if I'm not mistaken, I saw this tweet, the highest F4 traded at the deadline, Isaiah
That's
Kiner
crazy.
Falefa. That's crazy. And then Martin Perez, he leaves the Pirates rotation. He goes to San Diego. This team got better, surely. How much better? I'm not sure. Before you give me strength and weakness, give me a percentage chance of them sneaking into one of these wild card spots. Just looking at that offense, Obviously, you're getting Jones back, so you got Skeens, Jones, Keller at the front of that rotation. They're scary if they get in. But the big question for Pirates fans, I think, is what's the likelihood that they end up giving themselves a shot in a wild card series?
I'm gonna cheat on this one because I just happened to do research on playoff odds for my show today, and it was 14.7% according to Fangraphs, and I feel like that's about right. Like
Yeah.
puncher's chance about 15%. Yeah, I don't expect it, but can they have a hot month? This is the cool thing about this race right now. Any of these teams has a really hot month with 2 months left. You're going to be in it till the end if you have a really good August. So I think they did enough to set themselves up to maybe have a great August. And if not, they fall out of the race. Maybe you shut down Skeens in September and you live to fight till 2025. But they're in it. They're in it. I like their chances more than the Reds or the Cubs or even the Giants right now.
And the good news on the Pirates front is they curbed Skeens' output at the beginning of the year. So
Yeah.
if they do find themselves in a situation to compete, they don't need to curb him at the end of the year, which is really cool. And like he's at
Yeah.
80 and 2/3 in the big leagues right now. I think he was at 20 something in the minor leagues, maybe 30 something. So there's not much on his arm right now. He's at about 110, 115 in total. He was at 122 last year at LSU. Like that was by the end of June. So he's in a really good spot to compete. I'd be stunned if we didn't have the same strength. What's your strength?
Paul Skeens.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah,
Mine is
Paul Skeens
overall
and pitching.
rotation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mine is overall rotation. The back end of that bullpen looks sharp. Holderman has been a blessing, and I'm sorry that you guys let him go for Daniel Vogelbach at the 22 deadline, but Holderman, Chapman, Bednar is. I know Chapman is finicky. I know Bednar was finicky at the beginning of the year. That's a very comfortable 7-8-9 for me. If I'm looking at the lens of the Pittsburgh Pirates, you got a little bit better with Beeks. Stratton, Nicholas is a dog. Dennis Santana's been throwing the crap out of it right now. But that rotation with Jones coming back of Skeens, Jones, Keller, Luis Ortiz has been throwing the shit out of the ball with a 2.75. Jake Woodford just had a hell of a spot start. Bailey Falter just came back. That rotation has the top end talent and it has depth too.
I actually wrote Paul Skeens, and then I had a little asterisk, and it just said Luis Ortiz to remind myself to talk about it because what he's done this year, it's crazy. He has been so good, and yeah, their pitching is absolutely their strength. And I think to kind of move over to the weakness, what I said was Brian Reynolds is their best hitter. That's their glaring weakness, but at least they did enough to maybe make it, a good enough competent lineup to get around that.
That's the thing, man. Like I'm looking at a lineup here with four guys in double figures in homers, and one of them is O'Neill Cruz, who, if I'm not mistaken, just commit 5 errors over the span of 3 games in Houston. He leads Major League Baseball in errors committed at this point. I think he's committed 20 errors. McCutcheon's got 13, Cruz has 17, but Reynolds has 18. They just added a co-homer leader in Brian De La Cruz. Like that's awesome to get a
Yeah.
little bit more pop. It's the subdued Guardians conversation where it's like, if only they had more juice. And they got a flawed hitter in De La Cruz, but a flawed hitter with juice that can run into some baseballs. But I'm with you. Like, I'd say top to bottom offensive production is the weakness for me. Brian Reynolds is their best hitter. Cruz has flashes where he is absolutely insane. Brian Hayes has a sub 300 OBP and a sub 300 slug. When's it going to happen?
Everyone thought it was going to happen last year after a second half, and it hasn't happened this year. So I don't know if it will ever happen for a full season, but you know what? He is the type of hitter where maybe he could get hot for 2 months here. And that's what they need. They just need a couple guys to get hot, and their pitching will carry them. But
Yeah, and like I'm looking at their bench and it's unique. I know Skeens loves throwing to Grandal. Bart and Grandal seems like the best possible catching tandem that they can run out at the moment. Connor Joe is a hell of a bench bat, but then Alika and Bay, they offer a level of dynamicism, but in terms of packet a punch, neither of them are looking like that spark plug off the bench. But I think they're serviceable big league players. So I'm with you. Two more teams, the two best in the NL Central, the St. Louis Cardinals and the Milwaukee Brewers. And we go to St. Louis here. St. Louis's transactions, very few, One was big, three-team deal: Cardinals, Dodgers, White Sox. The White Sox got screwed. We've documented that very well over the last two episodes on the Just Baseball show. But in essence, St. Louis gave up Tommy Edman, who hasn't played for them yet this year, and Oliver Gonzalez for Eric Fetty and Tommy Pham. Fleece of the century. And then they got out from under Dylan Carlson. They get Sean Armstrong in return. Armstrong was not having a good year in Tampa. So, you add a guy that can throw, the fifth inning when you're down four, but Fetty strengthens a very, very veteran rotation. But Pham kind of speaks to my overall strength for St. Louis, and that's lineup on paper. That's what I wrote down because I went into this year saying, oh my God, Jordan Walker's going to be awesome. Mason Wynn's going to be awesome. Turns out only one of them has been awesome, but Arenado and Goldschmidt at the corners, turns out, they haven't been that awesome. Lineup on paper is really good. and
Yeah.
now it's just a matter of doing it when you're actually in between the chalk.
Yeah, I think Tommy Pham was a really good addition. There's sometimes where just seeing him in that Cardinals jersey and then he has two monster games to start. It's like, oh yeah, he's just going to be amazing down the stretch. Probably not going to sustain this, but he'll be really good. My strength was the Cardinal way, like because I look at this wild card race and I feel like ultimately the final spot might come down to the Cardinals, the Mets, and the Diamondbacks. I feel like the Padres and the Braves might just be the best two of those wild card teams that grab spots. And I feel like on paper, the Diamondbacks and the Mets have definitely better lineups, much better lineups. And overall, I feel like it should be one of those two teams. But I could just see the Cardinals kind of plugging away. They haven't had a losing month all season. And so they're just sort of playing just better than 500 baseball, getting it done, which brings me to my glaring weakness. And I said it's father time because Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt this year haven't been the same. How much is that rotation going to hold up down the stretch? Is that going to end up being an Achilles heel? I don't know, but that was my glaring weakness.
You just put the toothpick in for both of those. The Cardinal way being your
Yeah,
strength and father time.
I,
Like
I
that's
wrote this.
so
I wrote these notes at like 3:30 last night, and I had a little bit of fun with it. So
I love that. Well, it just feels like you're sitting on the porch drinking a whiskey, and it's like, yeah, the Cardinal way. Like
yeah,
they do things this way. But you know what? They're all 36, which is exactly.
exactly.
Yeah, like I'm looking at this pitching staff. Obviously, offensive execution could be my weakness. Offensive offense on paper is the strength. Offense in practice is the weakness. No, I can't do that.
I
Um,
think you should do that. I think that's exactly what it is. They
it
have
might
they,
be.
they have Wilson Contreras and Alec Burleson, and everybody else has been about league average or worse this year. I mean, it's just I don't know. I don't know if I buy into that lineup.
Now, okay. A question just like off the top of your head. What shortstops, if you were starting a franchise from scratch and everybody's available, what shortstops are you taking over Mason Wynn? 22-year-old Mason Wynn.
Right now, I mean, off the top of my head, Witt, Gunner, Lindor,
Ellie.
Ellie,
I'll
um,
still take Seager.
yeah, take Seager. And then you get into kind of like that. I mean, Mason Wynn, are we trying to say he's a top 10 shortstop in baseball? Because I think to
I
start,
Yeah, not production wise, but I think moving forward, if I were like eyes on the future, who could look that part? I think Mason Wynn is in that conversation.
yeah, I think I'm with you there. Trey
Yeah.
Turner, obviously, but yeah, I think I'm with you.
I think it would be a serious conversation, Mason Wynn or Bo Bichette, and I think that I lean Wynn at this point.
Yeah, right now you'd have to.
For sure. But I mean, this bullpen has been good, man. Like Helsley's rocking a 2-1. He's saved 33 games at this point. He's been one of the better relievers in all of Major League Baseball. Again, in case you forgot, Kittredge has been good. Ryan Fernandez has been awesome. Jojo Romero has been awesome. John King has been awesome. They're piecemealing the rest of it together, but I don't care. Like, I just named four guys that have been legit and reliable. And I didn't even mention Kyle Leahy, who's been fine. I think the fragility of this borderline senile rotation is going to get to me at some point where you've got 37-year-old, almost 37-year-old Kyle Gibson sporting a 3.97 innings eater. Lance Lynn, innings eater. Miles Michaelis, At the end of the day, he's got a 5. I know that he had an out of body experience for like a month, but aside from that, he's been brutal to watch. They just turned to a Michael McGreevy, who I know was really good in his big league debut, but I get a little nervous when I see him try and turn a lineup over a second and third time. Fetty was a huge help to curb that, and having Sonny Gray and Eric Fetty throw 40% of your starts is huge. But I'd say fragility of the bullpen is my thing, along with offense in practice.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it's a team that I think can win every game that they're in line to with that bullpen, and they can get these guys, to get through 5, 6 innings and shorten games. So I would not be surprised at all if they make the playoffs. I don't think they're one of the best wild card teams, though. I think if they make it, it's a more boring playoff field than if the Diamondbacks make it, for example.
Totally. I'm totally with you. Last but not least in the National League Central is the Milwaukee Brewers. The Brewers were a bit more quiet than I was expecting and I was hoping at the deadline. They acquire Frankie Montas for Weimer, Junis, and Cash. They also get Nick Mears, the reliever from Colorado, for Bradley Blaylock and Eugenier Herrera. I know I'm saying Herrera right, but Ujanyyer. I think Eugenier. I wanted a lot more from Milwaukee, a lot more, and I didn't get it.
See, I'm surprised that you expected more. I could see wanting more, but expecting more. Look, they don't have a sense of urgency because they know that they're in great position to make the playoffs, and this is what they do. And it's frustrating, but when they're still competitive in 2028, they'll look back and say, "Oh, we didn't give up too much in 2024." I agree, though. I mean, look, at some point, when are you going to push the chips forward? Maybe they just didn't see the difference maker that they could attain. Like for them, if they had to match that price on Trevor Rogers, is that worth it to them? And I guess I could kind of see where it's not. But yeah, that rotation, like we've been saying all year, it feels like they're getting by on smoke and mirrors, and at some point, and typically in a playoff round, that's gonna end up costing you, and I think it probably will.
I loved getting out to American Family Field on Monday night because Peter essentially made me atone for my statements on the Brewers rotation to Brewers fans' faces. They were like, I forgive you. I disagree, but I also totally see what you're saying. And I'm like, hey, you, that's all I needed to hear, man. It's when you get into a postseason series, this is not going to be good enough. And I think that Brewers fans fully understand that. And Frankie Montas does not really up my confidence level in this. You get it. Okay, say you get that wild card bye and you go to the NLDS. Freddie Peralta has a 3.9. Tobias Myers has been Tobias Myers. He's got a 3.1. But Tobias Myers, a guy who has been crunched out of a lot of roster situations before, is in your postseason rotation likely as the 2. Frankie Montas has a 5 ERA at 19 starts. He's probably the 3. And Colin Ray is probably the 4. And Aaron Savali, who you just acquired, is out of that postseason rotation. That's like the worst postseason rotation I've seen in quite some time. I have
Yeah,
no
it's not
faith
great.
in that, unfortunately.
I mean, let's just say I don't know how it would work as far as the matches, but they end up in a wild card series against the Cardinals, and the Cardinals got Sonny Gray and Eric Fetty. Like all
Sonny,
the
Sonny and Peralta, give me Sonny Gray at this point. And then you've got Fetty and Tobias Myers. Give me Fetty.
So all of a sudden, you've proven to be the best team all year long, and in a short series, you can get screwed. So yeah, I think ultimately I would go back and say, all right, well, what else could they have done? And I feel like you could almost give them a pass based on what was available at this deadline.
Yeah.
But I mean, even go all in a little bit and get Jack Flaherty. They could have topped that package and be in a much better standing. But I guess that it's probably just against their philosophy to do that for a rental.
They inarguably have a top 5 farm system in all of baseball. Like
Yeah.
it was a consensus top 5 system in all of baseball. You had the assets to go do things. They didn't do it. I can appreciate the sustainability of that, and I can appreciate what's coming down the line. Like, hey, Mizorowski's going to debut next year. He just got to Nashville. Awesome. But at the end of the day, man, like, I know they've been dealt a shit hand this year when it comes to the rotation. DL Hall is throwing in Nashville right now, but Gasser's out for the entirety of this year and likely next year. So when you close your eyes and see the Peralta, Gasser, Hall, Mizorowski, like that turned into 26 and not 25, which stinks, but that's the nature of the beast. So, yeah, I mean, my glaring weakness is the rotation. And I guess bullpen health at this point. The bullpen has been awesome, but the bullpen has been very, very banged up. And I'm looking at Brian Hudson and Trevor McGill both on the shelf right now. You also got Paredes on the IL and Zastrizny on the IL. But in terms of strength, this lineup is a lot better than I think anybody was expecting this year.
I said athleticism, but yeah, I mean, it was basically just the starting lineup. Six guys with 12 or more stolen bases. So they're a fun watch for sure. Yeah, it's just that lineup's gonna really have to carry them. They have to win some pretty high scoring games, I think, in the playoffs if they're gonna win it. But look, if you can give your bullpen a lead, I mean, they could make a little bit of a run. I just can't see any world where that rotation makes a deep run. Like they can win a round or two, but I can't see them making out of the NLCS with what they have. They just not good enough.
No chance. Last Brewer question. Let's play the hypothetical blank slate GM game again. How comfortable are you with a price point for Willy Adames this offseason? At
Just
what
to,
at what number do you get scared and say, I'm out?
I honestly think they're just going to take the compact. I can't even because he's going to get paid, right? I mean, if it's going to get to nine figures, and I feel like they're the type of franchise that can only have one guy making money, and that's Christian Yelich. So I feel like he's as good as gone, honestly.
He is. Now, if you were an opposing GM and you needed a shortstop, if Adames' camp came to you and said, hey, I need 150,
Done.
yes?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I have to figure out what the AAV of that is, but if you're talking like a $25 million, what is it, to like 6 years, 25 million a year? I mean, yeah, I feel like you go for that, especially in the market. He's by far the best middle infielder, by far.
Okay, how
So
about 6 for 180? 30. Do you clench your teeth yet? Or do you
yeah,
still say yes?
I think that's the perfect like marks that you put in there where some team might meet that, but I wouldn't want to be that team if I was the GM.
Fair. I think if push came to shove, I would think about saying yes. He's
I think he's played like the $30 million shortstop this year, but I've seen, I've seen enough. Like last year was not, I mean, it wasn't even 25 million,
no.
So I feel like 25 million is the perfect middle ground of you might get a $30 million season at some point, you might get a $15 million season at another point, and you're just kind of you're paying for the free agent because you want to get the talent. But to me, Adames is a $30 million player is a lot.
Damn. Yeah, I'm with you and split the middle. I agree with you at 25. I think 6 for 150 would be perfect. And I would be
Yeah.
fired up if my favorite team got Willy Adames.
What did Dansby get? Because I'd say maybe that's like what did he get, like 6 for 160 or something like that. Maybe it's Dansby money.
I thought it was 6 for 177. I know a lot
Well,
of
there
people
you go.
thrown out the Baez story deals, which was 6 for 140.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Dansby got 7 for 177. I think
Okay.
Willy Adames might go into free agency saying, I want 7 for 177. Is he the defender that Dansby is? No.
And that's about 25 million and change. So it's getting that seventh year. Yeah, maybe that's the move. And
Yeah,
and I think I would rather give a seventh year than pay him 30 million a year for six. I don't know.
I
Maybe
think
not.
I'm there with you. I would do 7 for 180 for Adames if he,
Yeah.
has this weird vendetta against Dansby Swanson's contract, like Lindor had against Tatis's contract, where it's like, I need $1 more million.
And rightfully so. Rightfully so.
But no, if Adamas is like, I need 7 for 178, I'm like, done. Shake your hand.
Yeah.
You're on my team now. Okay, we are going to do the National League East, but before that, quick break. I firmly plant my flag on the Miami Marlins winning the trade deadline.
Yeah.
They aced this thing in terms of what they wanted to accomplish. They accomplished it and then some. Again, if you've been under a rock this week, Davison De Los Santos and Andrew Pintar came back for AJ Puck. Davison De Los Santos, the minor league home run leader as it stands right now, already homered as a jumbo shrimp. Jazz Chisholm went to the Yankees for Augustine Ramirez, Jared Serna, and Abraham Ramirez. Will Schomburg came back for JT Chagua, an intriguing arm. Josh Bell, who is on revocable waivers, went to Arizona for a player to be named later. Bell filling in while Christian Walker is on the IL. Tanner Scott and Brian Hoeing to San Diego for a haul and a half. Robbie Snelling, the left-handed pitching prospect. Adam Mazur, who's got 8 big league starts under his belt. Graham Pauley and Jay Bashirs come back. Brian De La Cruz goes to Pittsburgh for Junsuk Shim and Garrett Forrester. Trevor Rogers for Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers. Wow, from Baltimore. And then Huascar Brazoban is the newest New York Met for Wilfredo Lara in an intradivisional trade. Did anybody come close to having as successful a deadline as Miami? I think with what Tampa wanted to accomplish, Tampa is the runner-up for me. But dude, this was unmatched by anyone.
Yeah, there was three sellers to me that jumped out. The Marlins definitely won the deadline. The Rays, like you said, accomplished what they wanted to. And I'd say that the Blue Jays, as much as we could not agree with their plan and think, man, what would they have gotten for Chris Bassett or Kevin Gausman if they actually seriously considered it? Their plan was to still run it back in 2025, and they did a great job getting return on their rentals. So I'll give them credit for that because Kikuchi, that trade's insane.
Insane.
But yeah, the Marlins, they hit the home run, and any Marlins fan that was on the fence about Peter Bendix has, I would have come around by now. I don't know how you can. Even trading Arise when he did, if you think of the whole season, cashing in when he did on Arise as a player that's flawed and would not have gotten the same thing at the deadline. Yeah, it's huge.
Dylan Head can blossom into a beast, man. I mean, a game wrecker speed wise and a top of the order center fielder, and we'll see if he adds the impact. I know Head has been dealing with injury pretty much the entirety of this year. Speaking to your Bendix point, I watched his one-on-one with Kyle Seeloff, who's the radio voice of the Miami Marlins on the field in Tampa. And as soon as I watched that, I was sold on what Bendix did, and I'm sold on who Bendix is as an exec. He's super comfortable with who he wants his team to be. And he's comfortable at adapting from what might have been the previous plan. And Kyle asked Peter Bendix a question that in essence was, you got a lot of guys that are close, double A and triple A guys. Was that the plan, or was that just the way that the deadline unfolded? And he said it was the way that the deadline unfolded. And I was like, I can appreciate you deviating from the plan of grabbing a low A and high A all-star team if you have a struggling double A arm in Snelling, who was just baseball's minor league pitcher of the year last year, available. And Adam Mazur, who has, some unsuccessful big league time under his belt, but a guy that is legit and has been good at the upper levels already. When those guys fall into your lap and when it becomes a seller's market, you can capitalize and speed up the timeline a little bit. That kind of takes me into the strength. And the strength for me is power in pitching numbers, and pitching
Yeah.
and putting in parentheses. I ran through it with Aram on the deadline recap show, but in the not so distant future, this rotation has 8 or 9 guys that they can turn to in Sandy Alcantara, Braxton Garrett, Jesus Luzardo, Yuri Perez, Ryan Weathers, Max Meyer, Robbie Snelling, Adam Mazur, and I got to be missing 2 more, like 1 or 2 more. It's crazy what they got done pitching wise. And I mean, we're having the same conversation we did year or 2 ago, where the Marlins have too many starting pitchers that they know what to do with. Edward Cabrera, another one, 9th. There you go.
Yeah, they have a ton, and I honestly think that not Yuri Perez, geez, Jesus Luzardo this offseason, like he wasn't Tommy John, it's a back, right? It's a really bad back injury that's had him out all year, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. You put him on the market, 2 years left of control. I still think they could continue to do this rebuild and this churn. And yeah, getting the bats to catch up to the arms was clearly a priority, and they've done that. So yeah, their strength right now is that farm system and the pitching that's always been the backbone of what they've been trying to do. But now the bats are catching up. I do think they're gonna play some fun baseball down the stretch too. Not like incredible stuff, but I actually said pressure-freed spoilers because they're just like they have these guys now in Stowers and Norby that get a chance to play. Like a lot of guys are just going to get that opportunity to no stress environment, play in the big leagues, have fun for a couple months. You got Skip Schumacher winding down the end of his tenure. I don't know. I feel like they're going to piss off some wild card teams in the final 2 months.
Yeah. Noble Meyer and Thomas White, two others that I totally forgot to mention there that are already in high
Yeah.
A. Like, holy shit, there are power in numbers. Um, the weakness for me is they're prospects until proven big league success. And by that, I'm not necessarily talking pitching. I'm talking hitting, where they didn't grab a top 100 prospect. You could say Augustine Ramirez could be a top 100 prospect at the next update, and we'll see what happens on that front. But that's really the only guy. So this offense that has been one of the worst in baseball over the last several years, they added an impact minor league bat in the PCL and in the Texas League in Davison de los Santos. How's the plate discipline or lack thereof going to transfer to the major league level? Like, I have hitting questions about essentially everybody, and those can't be answered until you get 10, 20, 80, 100 games at the major league level. So that's where I stand on that. It's like, yeah, it's awesome that you stockpile prospects, but just being like the natural hater that you kind of have to be with prospects, and that turning into a good team in 2027, we have to see it, and we have to see who flames out, who doesn't.
I think you could kind of say player development is the weakness there, and particularly with those position players. When's the last good position player they developed? I mean, it's probably that whole class of guys they traded when Jeter came in. JT Realmuto is probably the last one.
Mhm.
Yelich, Stanton, Ozuna, like that group. But since then, I mean, Jazz Chisholm has been their best development story. And I think we're going to find out that he's going to be way better in a Yankees uniform than he was in a Marlins uniform, which sort of speaks to that, not really helping their guys. So yeah, I think player development is going to be huge now. Like you can accumulate talent. Peter Bednick can do a great job of that. Have they created an infrastructure that's going to help these guys actually realize their potential? That's what's going to make the difference to see if this is actually going to turn into anything.
And we're not going to find out for 2, 3 years. Like,
Yeah.
there's time there to see. And frankly, like, when you hand the keys to the Corvette over to a new person, when a new person spearheads your baseball operations side, they get some trial and error when it comes to player development and personnel that are best equipped to handle player development. Like, hey, Mel Stottlemyre Jr. spearheading the pitching side of things is awesome.
Yeah.
But like, guy may fail in terms of the hitting development side. And you could go to a second person, and that second person may fail. And then you go to a third person, and the third person figures it out. There's a reason that execs have a way longer leash than managers, who have a way longer leash than players.
Yeah. I can't get past you saying that Bednick's got handed the keys to a Corvette in Miami. I
He got
mean,
handed the keys to a 1997 Toyota Camry.
okay, there you go. Now I feel better. Okay, I feel better. Now that we got that cleared up. Yes. Okay. It's
Gotcha.
called Lone Depot Park.
Yep, bingo. Okay, the Washington Nationals. They sold not as much as I was expecting them to sell, I'd say. The Washington Nationals traded Hunter Harvey a couple weeks ago now, to Kansas City for Caden Wallace and a comp pick. They also traded Jesse Winker to New York for Tyler Stewart, big right-handed pitching prospect. Lane Thomas net them a good return, in my opinion. Lane Thomas went to Cleveland for Alex Clemmy, Jose Tena, and Rafael Ramirez Jr. Then they got one of the better performers in minor league baseball, who was a minor league free agent signing, 25-year-old in AAA, Andres Chaparro, for Dylan Floro. Floro had a 2.05 ERA, and they turned that into a guy that's hitting well over 300, OPSing well over 900 in Chaparro. But Kyle Finnegan's still on this roster.
Yeah.
Rainey, I don't know what the value is because Rainey's had a terrible year, but like, Rainey's still on this roster. Jake Irvin is still on this roster. I was expecting more guys to go than this. So I thought it was a pretty quiet deadline, unfortunately, for Washington.
Yeah, I have no problem with Irvin staying, but how do you not get something for Finnegan? I don't understand how the runner-up in the Tanner Scott sweepstakes doesn't come to the Nationals for Finnegan, especially because you had the extra year of control. I thought he might get the most of any reliever on the market, honestly, just because he had a year and a half. So that to me seems like a huge swing and miss. I guess for them, you still have a chance to trade him next year, but yeah, I can't believe they couldn't find a trade to pull the trigger on with Finnegan.
I have no idea how that didn't come to fruition, especially, and I know that there's limited time to work with because Scott went to San Diego 20 minutes before the deadline, 15.
Yeah, but these GMs are supposed to have these things lined up where it's like, there had to be a GM that had a plan B that you would at least you would have thought.
I'm
I
totally with
could be wrong, but
I'm totally with you. But you need to be able to deviate quickly, and I'm with you. I'm stunned that Finnegan is still on the Washington Nationals. My strength here is I can see the vision offensively.
yeah.
CJ Abrams, James Wood, you have Keibert Ruiz locked up as the catcher. Dylan Cruz is in AAA. I think Jose Tena can play a good second base for you moving forward. So I see where they're at. Brady House just got to AAA as well. I can see the vision offensively. That's my strength. My weakness is I'm struggling to see the vision pitching wise because you have an older bullpen, I'd say, for what you should be at this point. And the rotation, I love Gore moving forward. Hers, Parker, they can be mid rotation, back of the rotation, mid rotation. I would want to pay a starting pitcher $25 million to be like the co-front man with Mackenzie Gore. And I don't know if they're going to do that for a couple of years. So offense in general is the strength. The weakness is pitching in general, I guess.
We had an article that I remember signing right before the deadline, just talking about how the Nationals have effectively done a rebuild. And I think they've really hit the mark from nailing the Juan Soto trade to everything else and sort of waiting out that Patrick Corbin contract and this is the last year of it. They're not that far away. My biggest strength, I said, was the youth movement. And then I said the glaring weakness is they're probably a year away from being a year away. I think next year is the year where they're gonna let all the kids play. They probably won't make any big splashes in free agency,
Yeah.
but you could see 2026 them being players in that free agent market because they have a team that's close. So I think they're getting there. They're definitely while I think like Finnegan was a big miss. I would say they've had a good process in place and they've continued to move along it. And so I think the Nationals will be back. Like I think that's a rebuild that's going to work. It just might not be until 26.
In 26, I think would be ARB1 for CJ Abrams. So then the window is there. You've got
Yeah.
that. You have a year and a half of James Wood at the major league level under your belt. You have at least a year of Dylan Cruz and Brady House at the major league level under your belt. And you can see what you have in a Tana and frankly a Hers and a Parker. And Gore, I think will be hitting arbitration at that point as well. So
Well,
yeah,
I was just gonna say, if that's the case, if you're still a year away from ARB for Abrams, I would lock him up this offseason.
they'll try. I don't know how easy that's going to be.
Yeah.
I think he's a bit pricier than a lot of people would expect because he's so young, because he already has so many major league games under his belt. And if people ever doubted the impact, you're not watching this year. He's hitting
Yeah.
the crap out of the ball. So I think that guy's value could skyrocket, and he may see that and may see
Hmm.
that he just took off from the launch pad and say like, hey, I'm going to hit free agency and see what happens there. So we'll see what happens. But at the very least, a 3-year window opens in
Yeah.
2026, and you can find the supplemental free agents there. So I'm totally with you. 3 more teams and teams that are firmly in the wild card picture in the National League East. The New York Mets, Ryan Finkelstein's New York Mets, they were pretty active at the deadline. They got Jesse Winker for Tyler Stewart. They got Paul Blackburn for Cade Morris. They swap out Josh Walker, and they got Huascar Brazoban for Wilfredo Lara. So they improved that bullpen with Brazoban. They got a guy who's been successful in Miami. They got a back end innings eater in Blackburn. And they got outfield help in Jesse Winker. Where are the deficiencies still?
Well, I'd say it's top end pitching, but I'll also add in this past month, they also right at the beginning of the deadline action, they got Ryan Stanek, and about 2 weeks ago they got Phil Maton also.
Mm-hmm.
So to get that many pitchers, and I think what's interesting about the bullpen moves that they made, Brazaban has options. Tyler Zuber already did get optioned. They did get a couple guys that they could send down to Syracuse, and that's important because they have Reed Garrett, who's had a really good season. Daniel Nunez has been awesome. And then Sean Reed Foley, another guy that's had a lot of success, all on the injured list.
Yeah.
So I think they're gonna try to piecemeal this bullpen together. They didn't get, I think, the really great arm that fans are hoping for, but Braziban's been pretty damn good this year. And the one thing I'll say is it felt different on Friday night against the Atlanta Braves prior to the deadline, where the Mets score 7 runs on Charlie Morton and Kodai Senga ends each of the first 5 innings with a strikeout. You were like, all right, not only they're going to be a wild card team, they're going to be the first wild card team. And then Senga pulls his calf.
Yeah.
Had they had Kodai Senga, I think it would have been a layup for them to make the playoffs. Not that they're more of a dogfight, but I think they have enough depth to weather these next 2 months, and their greatest strength is their lineup. So I think they can still hit their way there.
They can absolutely hit their way there. I'm with you. It's top end offensive talent was my big strength for the New York Mets. If Senga and Scott were in this rotation, I would feel a hell of a lot better about the New York Mets. But at the end of the day, man, like I'm looking at four guys in Manaya, in Sevy, in David Peterson in 10 starts, and in Jose Quintana that are all rocking sub fours.
Yeah.
And that's what you need to get through a regular season. And the fact that you can add Paul Blackburn to the fold there, and I know he's only made 9 starts and he's got a 4.4 at this point. But the fact that you can add Blackburn on the heels of four sub four ERA guys at this moment makes me think that they can pitch just enough without Sanga and Scott to complement that offensive firepower that they have. I can't leave the Mets without asking the Alonso question again. He's going to test the market, I assume, but
Yeah.
you still think he's going to do the Nimmo thing where he tests the market and comes back?
I don't. It's trending more and more to me like he's gonna end up on another team. I don't know
Are
though.
you scared of that, or is it like, hey, if that's what happens, then that's what happens?
It's been such a weird year. It's been such a weird year where I feel like I'm okay with whatever happens. And the biggest part of that is Mark Vientos.
Yeah.
Honestly, Mark Vientos has played so well that I almost don't even want to see them move him off third base because he has more value as a third baseman. And he's been a positive defender, which is stunning to me that Mark Vientos has done that. So I could see a world where Pete Alonso comes back to the Mets on a super team friendly deal than what everyone was expecting. And maybe without the pressure, you see a better version of Pete Alonso next year. Vientos at third and Brett Baty becomes trade bait. But they have everything they need. They also have Ryan Clifford starting to do it in double A, and
Yeah.
he could be a first baseman. They have Carson Bench, Drew Gilbert, Jet Williams, who could all be in the outfield. Like they have the pieces to say goodbye to Pete Alonso and not pay him $25 million a year if that's what he's going to get. So part of me thinks he's going to end up somewhere else.
Got you. Okay. Now, on the positive side, I'm thinking about possible free agent acquisitions in the rotation that could come to New York and be somewhere sprinkled in by the end of next year. Kodai Senga, Christian Scott, Brandon Sproat. And I'm like, dude, that is awesome. And whatever you get from a Tidwell or a Dom Hamill, I'm not sure where your, overall like hope meter lies on a Tidwell and a Hamill, or even a Vassal, who seems like a back end guy, maybe. Man, that rotation can get very good very quick.
Not to mention, I would not be surprised at all if priority number one in free agency is Corbin Burns. So
Huh.
I'm just saying, I don't know if the Orioles are going to sign him, but do you think that David Stearns might want him back with Steve Cohen's money over paying Pete Alonso, who's not his guy? Uh,
Now, counterpoint, Stearns essentially beat Burns to a pulp in an arbitration case, and that pissed Burns off.
I mean, fair, but different ownership group, like different. I think it's a different situation. But yeah, whether it's Burns or somebody else, I think they're gonna pay a pitcher again. I don't know if that pitcher's in this market. If it's not Burns, I could see them just re-signing Luis Severino. But
But for the sake of the exercise, Burns, Senga, Scott, Sproat as a possible four-man in the postseason in 2025, salivating.
that's why where I'm at with Pete because I feel like Pete is like they strike out on their pursuit of Juan Soto and Corbin Burns and Pete Alonso's not getting his market and okay let's let's come together we still love each other but they're both going to date around in the beginning of this offseason. I will say getting back to this year when it comes to what I put as their greatest strength
Yeah.
I said a lineup full of 120 plus WRC plus guys because they have Jose Iglesias rocking a 157. That's not going to hold up, but it's crazy. Mark Vientos 154. Have a little more faith that might hold up, which is insane. JD Martinez, Francisco Lindor 128, Nemo and Alonso 123. Alvarez just dipped below 120 yesterday at 117. And then Jesse Winker comes into the fold as well. They got a really good lineup right now, and I think that's what could carry them to the playoffs here.
Cool beans. Okay, two more teams and two legitimate World Series contenders. The Atlanta Braves before the Philadelphia Phillies. The Atlanta Braves at the deadline. Pretty freaking underwhelming. Do they bring back two heroes from the 2021 World Series run? Yes, they do. Jorge Soler in a San Fran salary dump. Luke Jackson comes with him. Tyler Matzik and Sabin Ceballos go back to San Francisco. And that's it. That's it. Michael Harris was just transferred to the 60-day. Don't think too much about that. That was merely transactional. He's been out for a long time already, and you can backdate a 60-day assignment from a 10-day. So it's not the end of the world on that front. Michael Harris could very well be back this year from a hamstring strain. Ozzy Albies has a fractured wrist that happened, 2 weeks ago? That's probably it for his season, and unless I missed something. Acuna, obviously out. This offense has been entirely underwhelming this year. So I guess my weakness there is offense in practice.
I said inconsistent offense was the weakness I put. Yeah, and the Soler trade, I think it was very quick for everyone to applaud it, and rightfully so. I mean, he's been swinging the bat great since June. But I do wonder function on that roster. For one, he's playing right field again now, and they have both him and Azuna under contract next year. Technically, you could get out of Azuna if you wanted to, but why would you? I mean, the way he's swung the bat, $16 million for a club option. I think they picked that up. So I wonder, like, is Soler back on the market in the offseason? Are they renting Jorge Soler, or are they just gonna try to keep running him out there in right field on a limited basis or something and making it work? I think it was necessary to improve that offense, but it does sort of jam them up in the future. So I do kind of wonder how that trade's going to work beyond this season.
Part of me thinks that they're just going to keep running it back, and Soler could just be a Brave, and we'll see what happens on that front. They may be willing to, have the money if he isn't performing to a level where he wants to test it again. But yeah, I like that we're both there, and like I look at Matt Olson and Austin Riley's year, and I'm just like scratching my head. I'm like, what's going on here? Olson in particular, because Riley, I know Riley was dealing with some injuries and all that. Olson's been healthy the entire year. And how do we go from 54 homers to 17 at this point? He should be up there at 31 with Ozuna.
It doesn't make sense. The whole lineup. I mean, the way they were last year compared to this year, it's shocking. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you know what's crazy about it is you look at the wild card race right now. You said the Braves are still a World Series contender, and I get it. I mean, they're pitching if they get there, but like this is the most vulnerable the Braves have been in a long time, where there is a world where the Braves don't make the playoffs. I don't think that that's likely, but it could happen where any point in the last 5 years, we would have said there's no chance.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that front. In terms of strength, it's the rotation, and forearm neuritis scares the shit out of me in regards to Max Fried, and I know that Strider's out for the year. But the fact that they're still running out Chris Sale at a 2.7, Spencer Schwellenbach, who has been plenty serviceable in his 10 starts, Reynaldo Lopez at a 2.06, and now they're spot starting Grant Holmes, and he looks good. That bullpen is ridiculous, man. I mean, Rysel sporting a 1.7 at this point. Joe Jimenez at a 2.3, Minter at a 2.7, Pierce Johnson at a 2.7, Dylan Lee at a 1.9, Jesse Chavez at a 2.3. It's clockwork with them in the bullpen. I worry about the rotation health, but frankly, on the mound, I'm not half as concerned as what's going on at the plate for Atlanta.
Yeah, Ronaldo Lopez, I was just looking, I guess his injury is day to day. That was the other one where it was like, okay, what's going on here? If he stays upright, I think they're going to be fine. But that's sort of the world where they don't make it, right? It is if the injury bug catches them at the end of this season and you don't have Freed and Lopez and it's just Chris Sale. It's crazy to me if you rewind the tape to February and we just put blind everything else. We just put Marcell Ozuna, Chris Sale, and Ronaldo Lopez this season in front of you. You would have thought the Braves would have been the Phillies this year.
Bingo.
Like the way those three have played, but everything else just hasn't worked out the way you would have expected.
I'm totally with you. Also, apparently this morning, Harris and Albies are expected back. So Albies is expected back from that fractured wrist.
Okay,
As of this morning, Max Fried's bullpen went great yesterday, according to Alex Anthopoulos, and he could be in line to start as soon as this weekend. So
there you go.
there you go. Fried is back, and that validates my thought. Last but certainly not least, one of, if not the World Series favorite, and I know that they're on a skid. I do not care. This game goes on over the course of 6 months and 162 games in 187 days. You're allowed to have a shitty 2 weeks. The Philadelphia Phillies and what they did on the transactional front. They got corner outfield help. Austin Hayes for Sir Anthony Dominguez and Christian Pache in a big leaguer for big leaguer swap. Carlos Estevez comes for two really solid pitching prospects. George Klassen, Samuel Aldegari. They go to LA, but Estevez joins that bullpen. Tanner Banks joins that bullpen. William Bergola goes back. Seth Johnson and Moises Chassé come to Philly. So they get prospects in return for Gregory Soto. They viewed him as surplus high leverage. This is the best bullpen in baseball now, and it's not close adding Estevez to the fold. And I'll just run you through the names that they have, man. Hoffman, Estevez, Kerkering, Strom, Alvarado, Tanner Banks. Wow, man. On the heels of that rotation, Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez, and probably Ranger when we get to the postseason. How do you beat this pitching staff?
They're loaded. They're loaded. I said for their strength, I said best top four in baseball, and I said it's twofold because on one hand you have that rotation, on the other hand, just steady production from their lineup. Harper, Turner, Schwarber, Bohm. Those guys all rocking a WRC plus 130 or better.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean they just have everything you need. I said their only weakness is being Goliath, because they've been David. We've seen them thrive as David. Now they got to
Yeah.
be the top dog. But there's not a hole on this team. I don't feel like right now.
I love that weakness. I'm going to steal it too. Their only weakness is being a front runner for the first time. You can say the bottom of that lineup.
Yeah, you can,
Even
but
then, like, are we not totally expecting a Bryson Stott and a Nick Castellanos and a JT Realmuto to level up in the postseason? Because I am, man. That's what
eh,
Stott and Castellanos do. And JT's a vet. Brandon Marsh has proven to be a gamer in the postseason. I'm not worried about any aspect of this team, and that's the only reason to panic, that there's no worry there. It's always a flawed team that wins it. It's never the flawless team that wins it.
yeah, I mean, I even love the idea of like a Hayes Marsh, pseudo platoon that they got going now. So yeah, they're loaded. They're absolutely loaded. So there's no way they don't win the World Series, right?
Right, absolutely. And
No
there's no
chance.
way that the Mets are the one hoisting up the trophy when it's
None.
all said and done.
None. Yeah,
Um,
not a chance.
Fink, you're the man. Thank you so much for hopping on with me.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Every link you need is in the episode description. I hope you guys enjoy your weekend of post deadline clarity baseball, and we'll be back with a weekend roundup, getting back into the old pattern on Monday. Thanks, guys.